Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Empower and Equip Live. This is season 2. And if you haven't checked out season 1, please go into my YouTube video archives and check it out from last summer. My name is Raquel Brown. I am a wife. I am a mother. I am an educator. And most importantly, I am in love with Jesus Christ, who is my Lord and Savior. And my calling, connected to my first love, who is Jesus Christ, is to empower parents, Christian parents in particular, on our journey to raise kids that know, love, and serve God. And through this platform on YouTube, I'm able to do that by sharing strategies, resources, and just opening up conversations about topics that we don't always talk about in the church, and using this platform as an opportunity to deepen your knowledge as a parent, to widen your skill set, to deepen your understanding around issues so that you can be the most impactful and effective parent possible. I always say this: you are an empowered parent, and part of what God has called me to do is to help you feel confident in this journey. It is not easy. It is very difficult raising children, but we know that if we do this together, if we come together in community, then we can make that job much easier. So if you haven't already, if this is your first time watching this YouTube channel, I ask you to subscribe. Subscribe right now. Hit that subscribe button so that you can know when the next videos are being uploaded and you can be up to date on everything that I'm putting out. Also, like this video. You don't have to wait till the end to like it. I know you're going to like it. So just like it from now and share it. If you're watching right now and you're thinking, man, I have a friend or a relative who would really benefit from hearing this conversation tonight, share this link with them. If you are on Instagram, jump on Instagram right now and let them know that we are live talking with Andrew Blackwood. In a moment, I'm going to bring him on about building mental wealth. So I always talk about my podcast because I'm really, really, really proud of it. So I just want you to know that I have a podcast, and it is called The Empowered Parent, and it is available on all of your podcasting platforms. So if you are not subscribed to my podcast, please do that as well. We are in season 2. I just wrapped up season 2 a few months ago, and there are tons of knowledge. It is full of awesome ideas and tips and tips and strategies to help you as a Christian parent. All parents will benefit from listening, but the content is specifically curated to support Christian parents on this journey of faith with our families. So if you have not subscribed yet to my podcast, please do so tonight. So let's get right into this episode. It's called Building Mental Wealth, and I have my good friend. Listen, this is a little fun fact about me you may not know. I used to sing in the back row of a choir called Faith Outreach Choir. And that is one of the ways I got to know Andrew Blackwood. And he is just an amazing person. He has such an electric personality. He's very warm and loving and caring. And when I thought about who should I bring on to talk about mental wellness and mental health, the first name that came to me was Andrew Blackwood. So he is affectionately known as Coach Drew. He is a father. He is a husband. And I just recently learned when he sent me his bio that he left Toronto. He left us, and he's living in the Niagara region. And I'm sure he'll tell you about how much he loves it out there. His conviction is that we will grow and change through healthy relationship building. And he's been able to, over the 15 years of his practice, to share that message in different ways. And one of the ways he has done that is as an author. He is an author of a book called The Art of a Genuine Apology. And if you don't have that book, you need to get that book today. And I'm sure he will tell you how to get that book. Also in the description of this video is how you can contact him. But without further ado, I want to welcome to the virtual stage with me, Andrew Blackwood. Give him some clap up in the chat. If you're in the chat, give him a little clap up in the chat, Andrew.
Claps in the chat.
How are you doing, my friend?
I am great. I am so proud of you.
Oh, praise the Lord.
Can I tell the people that call you? You just go with.
You can tell them. This is family. Go ahead. Let the cat out of the bag.
Sandy.
Yes, Sandy. That's my pet name for those of you from the West Indies. So Andrew has known me for a long time. That's why he knows me not as Fancy Stush Raquel, right? You know
Right,
me as
right, right.
Sandy. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Anything I didn't capture in your bio. What do you want us to know about you before we get started?
Well, what do I want you to know about me? I, like yourself, I am a lover of the Lord. Um, like yourself, I am married. I have a beautiful wife and I have two beautiful daughters. I'm enjoying loving them and learning from them very, very much. Um, I, well, obviously, I'm not perfect, but because I'm aware of how imperfect I am,
Mhm.
I'm learning. And that is one of the things I'm most passionate about, learning. Like, I'm never done. And by God's grace, I get to learn more and more and more and more. So even though I have gone to school many times, the school of life is something that I'm grateful to be enrolled in. And the school of faith, it just never ends. So I'm grateful for that. And while we're on the topic of education, it's important.
Yes.
Although I have a doctorate, I get to be clear because I belong to a college as a registered psychotherapist, and they want to ensure that people know that what kind of doctorate I have. Okay, I have a doctorate of ministry to marriage and family. So if you want medication, don't come to me. Yeah. Don't do it because you might get some Cersei. You know, I might
Some bush tea, some bush tea.
right? That's what you get. And don't come to me for a diagnosis because I don't give those kinds of assessments. But if you want to know how to heal your relationships, come to me. If you want to know how to understand how to speak into the life of your child, come to me. What I want you to know is I don't speak just from the perspective of a professional, but also as a human being. Let me tell you, I I've come through some stuff,
Mm.
and I love the fact that God works all things out for our good. So everything that I have gone through, I am a transparent person. You will hear some of my story today, some of my stories. Um, yeah, so if you know pain, I want you to understand that it is not something that's going to get away in the way of your purpose. We just use it, use it, use it, use it. So that's what you can know about me.
Well, and I love what you just ended with, that even though you may experience pain, it will not prevent you from your purpose. And that way of thinking, that vein of thought is why I actually entitled this episode Mental Wealth as opposed to mental health. I firmly believe that if we take a mental wealth approach, thinking rather than what can I do to help my child when they're struggling, flipping that to how can I support my child now so that when they're struggling, they have some tools. Then when they're in that pain, they themselves will know this is a natural part of life, or this is something I'm going through, but it doesn't have to stop me from where I'm going. It doesn't have to detour me and bring me down somewhere permanently where I don't want to be. That you can actually navigate through those hardships and come out the other side wiser, stronger, and even able to help those who are around you. So when I think of mental wellness, when I think of the idea of mental wealth, I know for a fact in my house, that wasn't something that we talked about. My parents would not have I don't even think the word therapy was ever said in my whole entire childhood, or counseling. Like, those words weren't around the dinner table types of words. So why do you think it is, though, that parents, they find themselves in this reactive mode? Because I'm sure that in your experience, parents come to you when something is wrong. Like, oh my goodness, Andrew, I don't know what Sandy is doing. She's not coming home at night. And then you're kind of in this mode where, as a professional, you're trying to build and repair with this youth at the same time. Why do you think that happens in homes? Why do you think that parents are usually positioning mental wellness as something I need to react to, as opposed to something I can proactively support before my child gets into those tough situations?
Sandy, there are many reasons why we end up caught off guard. Obviously, there's culture, right? Where we come from. The truth is, you don't know what you don't know. right? You can't know what you haven't been taught. So if you haven't come from a world where this is part of the language that you speak, then you wouldn't think to be proactive about it. Then there is the reality that I talk about in The Art of a Genuine Apology, that good intentions are not good enough.
Mm.
Good intentions are not good enough.
Wait, somebody type that in the chat, please. Good intentions are not good enough. That is a good word. Keep going. Go ahead.
They're not. So and whoever has met my dad, you know that my dad is a wonderful man and I love him so much. And I'm sure he's given me permission to share all these wonderful stories. But as a child, I was a gifted musician. Okay. I didn't play by ear, but I could read music. And my dad was so supportive of that, so supportive. But what my dad was not aware of was that I was a very anxious child. I had no idea. I was gifted, but anxious. So he and my music teacher, they would push me, not just push me to practice, but push me to perform, right? And they had no idea that they were not helping me. Okay? They had the best of intentions, but what they were doing was pushing me in a direction that I wasn't ready to go in, not because I wasn't capable, but there was a world going on inside my head that they had no idea about. So I ended up quitting. I stopped playing altogether because I was so nervous. I was so scared and I didn't understand it myself.
Right.
So I couldn't explain it to them. So you don't want to know what you don't know. If somebody had come alongside them to say, okay, well, this is how to get insight into what your child is experiencing. This is how you can talk to the child to figure out what's going on for him and support him. You know, to be honest with you, like I probably at that point in time probably wouldn't have performed in front of everybody, but I would not have stopped playing.
Wouldn't stop playing. And that's the key.
That's
you wouldn't have stopped.
I loved playing. I didn't need to be in front of anybody to play, right? So you don't know what you don't know, and good intentions aren't good enough. That's why it's important to have community. Yes, break the stigma, but most importantly, get understanding. In all you're getting, get understanding, right? Not just of the world, but of your child. A lot of the times we have assumptions because the child comes from me,
that they're going to be like me. Yeah.
Or I must know because I'm the parent, right?
Yeah.
No, your child is a unique human being. Yes, you can share, right? You can empathize, you can relate on many levels, but it's going to be important to get insight from that child. That child, believe it or not, has the answers that you're looking for.
Agreed.
That child has the answers. When you go to the doctor because you're not feeling well, the doctor's going to ask you where. Right? Where does it hurt? What's going on for you?
You're going to ask some probing questions.
So it's important that we cultivate the kind of relationship with our children so that we are their first and biggest supporters, right? So when they come to us, even if they don't have the words, we can help them find the words.
And I'm constant. That's one of my number one messages, how important it is to build relationships with your child. But when we're speaking specifically about mental wellness and those things that our kids keep inside and they're not comfortable talking to, what are some ways that parents can build and foster? Because if we don't have that relationship with our kids, when they're going through what they're going through, they're not going to come to us. And then on top of that, if we have not put anybody in their path who they can go to, whom we trust, then you have a child who's dealing with things on their own. But what are some strategies? What are some things you would advise parents to do to help build that mental wealth in themselves in terms of knowledge? And then how do you transfer or give those tools to your kids?
Well, I like to use a multi-pronged approach. So one of them, and I touched on it earlier, is the relationship. You might not see a strong connection, but how someone feels, how they think, and how they relate to you, it's all connected. So you have the opportunity to cultivate is one of my favorite words, cultivate that open kind of relationship by doing one important thing. There's no such thing as a perfect person, There's going to be hurt. There's going to be issues and challenges. But when we learn how to address those challenges with care and competence, it strengthens the relationship. So if your child is hurt by you in some way, shape, or form, and you don't address that well, that stays with them.
So wait, let me jump in here. So you said care and competence. So when my child does something that has caused me hurt, or I've done something, and I usually our first reaction is, what happened to what? Why would you? How would you suggest a parent approach that? Because a lot of times children's feelings are invalidated and they're ignored. And
Yeah.
and we actually teach our children that any type of response to an adult that where you're angry as a child, or is wrong. Like, you should never
Right.
really be angry at an adult. That's kind of what we teach kids. How should parents be approaching those situations where they are hurt by their child, or they realize that they have hurt their child?
Yeah. And this is where faith gets blended in nicely with how we live and how we love. So there's so many different circumstances that we can think of to address our children. For starters, we want to be like Jesus, right? Like, if you're angry with your child, you are still responsible for you. You still have the opportunity
Yes.
to look like Christ in that moment. If you don't look like Christ, then you have some work to do.
That's a red flag, because you can't always be flipping over tables in the temple. You can't. He did that once. He did that one time.
And he didn't do it to the children, right?
Right?
He said, suffer them to come unto me. He didn't run them. Okay.
Exactly.
He didn't do that. So, and a lot of times we find it unrealistic to do that. But the truth is, when we recognize that we've got some work to do, that is important. So to the art of a genuine apology, we turn. Now, a lot of the times people have difficulty apologizing because of the culture. Parents did, apologize to kids. And I come from Jamaican culture, and I share this little joke. Hope you don't find it too crass. But growing up, the only time I heard a Jamaican say sorry was when they were melting, passing gas.
Sorry.
Right? That's when you're sorry. You didn't hear it when they recognized they did something wrong. At least not in the circles that I came from. Right? But here's the big piece about this. There's a lot of gems in the book, but the reality is, often when we are wanting to apologize, a part of us wants to, and then the other part doesn't, right? Sometimes we have fears about, okay, what does it mean if I apologize to my child? I'm going to be losing power, I'm going to be giving away authority, or whatever's going on. Or sometimes we feel conflicted because, well, what I'm doing is right. I'm a parent. I'm supposed to discipline my child, or they're not going to get everything that they want, right? So it's an all or nothing kind of relationship that we have with apology altogether.
Yes.
Whereas if you say, for example, like myself, I remember one time I scared myself when I yelled at my child. Like, that's how loud I yelled. I was like, oh my God, who is that?
Who is that guy?
Right? Like my dad. Like, I swallowed like my dad. Like, he's in here. And so when I went to address it, I didn't apologize for what I said. I didn't apologize for why I said what I said. I apologize for the volume.
How.
I apologize for the tone, right? So when you do that, you model for your child that, number one, I'm not perfect and I still love you. Number two, you're not perfect. You're not going to get it right either. And you can come to me. Just as I'm coming to you, you can come to me. You're not losing power in that moment. You're actually gaining power. You're gaining credibility. You're demonstrating that I am humble enough to come to you, so you can come to me, right?
Well,
so,
but Andrew, is this where now the difference between just being a parent and a godly parent comes in? Because you said it when you started responding, that you are not just responding. You have a higher expectation that says you need to model Christ all the time. Even when you're disciplining your child, you need to be modeling Christ. Even when you are offering correction, you need to be modeling Christ. So it's not just what you say. A large part of who Christ is how he says things. It's not just what was said, it's how he says it. And I think that is really important when we talk about godly parenting and where faith comes in. It's that how you respond to your child, you're actually teaching your child something about God. You're teaching your child something about Christ in how you respond in those moments.
100%. And, you know, I think parents all around the world, regardless of their faith, nationality, religion, whatever, I think the obligation and opportunity to be loving is the same.
Yes.
What I think is different is that let's dig a little bit deeper. When we think about being Christians, we often think about being like Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to present to you something a little bit different.
Yes, let's go. Push it.
All right. So if the definition of sin is missing the mark, okay, we sin when we miss the mark in being the best versions of ourselves. So God has called us to be the best versions of ourselves. And in so doing, we are being who we've been called to be. Christ was called to be himself, 100%. Like, I never met him. I don't know what he looked like, right? But the scriptures are very clear in the fullness of who he was. There was no question. There was no doubt. He was who he was and how he was supposed to be. When I look at myself, I'm like, oh, Andrew, you got ways to grow. I just know. I know. And that's the Spirit of God convicting us, right? You're not being the best version of yourself right now. How do you do that? That's what repentance is. You acknowledge it, and then you bring yourself into alignment with the best version of yourself. And that's how we follow in the steps of Christ. We say, you know what? I went wrong here. I've missed the mark. Let me come back into alignment. Let me address this, right? I'm not going to leave this stone unturned. I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. I'm going to come and if somebody offends you, if there's aught between you and your brother or your child, right? Provoke not your children to wrath. You go and you address it.
You make it right. Yeah.
You make it right. That's the opportunity we have, right? So that, and trust me, this is just one prong when it comes to addressing mental, emotional, spiritual wealth in our children, because those kinds of emotional wounds, they don't grow out of them.
And I love that you called it a wound, because it stays there. And it's funny when you said, when you caught yourself in that moment where your tone was off and your disposition was off with your daughter, you said you felt like you swallowed your father. And I think that happens to a lot of us. A lot of us will say, when I have kids, I'm never going to do that. And unless we are reflective people who are looking deeply into ourselves and being honest with what we see and being honest with where we need to grow, we will end up putting out exactly what was put in us. Right. Because that yelling or that way that our parents would have dealt with us, it's in us. It's as a wound, but it's in us. And unless we recognize it and repent from it, it's going to come out. And then you'll be saying things. It's funny. I've had a couple of those out of body experiences as well, where you're saying things and you're like, why are you so mad? Like, calm it right down. But it's just like it's almost like autopilot, because it's who your parents are is a part of who you are. Right. So it's important as parents to be honest about that. Otherwise, it's going to creep up when you don't even expect it.
Exactly. Right. And so if there's healing that we have yet to experience, it's important for us to delve into that and to access that, so that as we parent, as we move things forward with our children in the next generation, we're actually loving them effectively and preparing them. Right? You can only go as far with someone as you have gone yourself, right? So the degree of emotional health in any relationship is going to be dependent upon the health of the two people in it. That's true for couples, but that's also true for parent-child relationship, right? So if you've got stuff, because we all got stuff, if you've got stuff that has not yet been dealt with, it's good to acknowledge that. You take your stuff and you deal with it, so that when you deal with your child, it's not through the lens or through the mess of your stuff, right? You deal with that, and then you deal with your child separately. So
I would think that if a child needs therapy or counseling, the parent probably does also. Would you say that?
Wow, you're going down a interesting road here.
We're going in. We're going in.
It's, I don't like to make rules or generalizations. The truth is, we all benefit from having support at the right times and the right kind of support. So sometimes that support might look like therapy. Sometimes that support might look like informal support, like a friend or a book or a course, or, you know, whatever, prayer and fasting, whatever the support is, it's important to discern what is most appropriate in that moment. So yes, by and large, a lot of the times when children are in need of formal support, their parents benefit from having support too.
As well.
Right. So I've worked over the past 16 years in so many different settings. And you're right, there is definitely a benefit to the parent receiving support for themselves, but also support to support their child. Let me tell you, Sandy, I worked in youth detention. That was my first, well, outside of counseling and summer camps as a teen, my first professional job was in a youth jail. I was a youth detention custody worker. And let me tell you, my heart broke so many days in that place and so many nights in that place, because kids would come in and they would go out, and they'd come back in and they'd go back out. And it was just a cycle. And as much as you would have heartfelt conversations with these kids, they were going back home to the same environment, the same ways of thinking, and dealing with the same issues. And, you know, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do more education, because I wanted to serve outside of just the individual. There is so much that parents have the opportunity to do. And I love your tagline, power and equipment, right? But they haven't been equipped, and they don't feel empowered. They don't feel prepared. So what they do is like, okay, well, here, they throw up their hands, but in doing so, remember, good intentions aren't good enough. In doing so, they want to help their child, but what they end up doing is disempowering themselves. They remove themselves from that situation, and they don't learn, how do I come alongside my child in a way that we journey together?
This is so important. Andrew, this is so important. I want you to slow down on this point, because so much of our parenting is outsourced. We outsource education. We outsource entertainment in the form of extracurriculars. Many of us outsource, and I would say incorrectly, spiritual development to the church. And that is what you just said is the problem. That's the consequence. When you outsource completely, when you say, I'm going to send my child to counseling, I'm going to send them to therapy, I'm going to get them a mentor, I'm going to pray over them, but you don't choose to journey with them, you disconnect yourself from a child when they need you most. You may not know what to say as a therapist or as a counselor, but your presence and your willingness to walk with them is so important. Otherwise, it fractures your relationship with them. Can you just talk a little bit more about what you mean when you say journey with your child when they're going through challenges?
100%. So this is how it dovetails. The relationship piece is one part. The other part is understanding how the mind works. Okay. There's a whole world that happens in our heads that we don't know about. Forget our children. We don't know it about ourselves. But what I've been helping parents to do is understand that world a whole lot better, right? So let's take, for example, anxiety. Excuse me. A simplified version or understanding of anxiety is what you feel when you picture the future and you picture something unpleasant.
Okay.
That's like, there's no two ways about it. When you imagine your future and it's horrible, you're going
You
to
get
feel
anxious.
okay. And if you imagine that same future over and over and over and over, and you start to believe, I can't change that, that's what's going to happen, it's pointless, it's hopeless, what do you think you're going to feel?
That
Depressed,
anxiety. And well,
right?
all right.
See, so the anxiety rolls into depression, right? But I don't want to oversimplify it, because there is a world of contributing factors,
Yes.
whether that is being bullied, abused, diet, right? We all come to this world different, so there might be biochemistry stuff going on for that child that is different for you. You might have moved, there might have been loss in the family. There's a lot of things that happen. Either way, we process the world, we interpret the world, and we make meaning in here. So it's important for parents to understand, oh, my child is feeling this way. They're interpreting something. They have these, what I call flavors of thought. We have thought patterns that are unique to us that sometimes become inflamed when we find ourselves in situations. So I'll use myself as an example. I tend to use all or nothing thinking, okay, black and white thinking. When I get stressed or when I'm in a difficult situation, I start to use all or nothing thinking, okay? That is one of the biggest thought patterns that people have. So when I find myself in a situation and I'm stressed, I have certain rules in my head and lenses that I interpret situations in. So I'll go back to when I was in high school. And you knew me around these times, Sandy. But what you might not have known, that I was so anxious and I was so depressed.
I would have never known.
No. And
I would have never guessed it. Never.
I was high school president, right?
Wow.
I was singing, I was dancing, I was captain of teams, I was doing all this stuff. Let me tell you, Sandy, I hated myself. I didn't want to live. It was really, really bad. And when I think about it, one of the situations that I was dealing with is even though I was a gifted student, my grades weren't so good.
Wow.
And I failed chemistry. Okay. All my life, I was going to be a doctor. Okay. That was it. I was going to be a medical doctor.
That was your plan.
That was my plan. And that's what I told everybody, right? Everybody knew. Everybody's like, but when I failed chemistry,
that would have been a big blow. That's a big one.
I wasn't going to university. I couldn't go to university. I couldn't tell anybody. Life was over. I was under a bridge, living homeless. Like, it was extreme.
That was the future you saw for yourself.
Exactly.
When you failed chemistry.
When one course.
Wow. One course.
And
it was over.
It was over. It was over. And I was dealing with that alone. I had no one that I believed I could talk to that could help me. Because if somebody outside of me was able to understand how I was thinking, they could help me to appreciate how I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right. So, from the outside, I could be like, okay, Andrew, that was one course. Perhaps you could do summer school.
Right.
Right.
If you had another voice to show you your options.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and it's one thing, I guess, when we start to talk about options, we're really starting to delineate between how somebody thinks and what somebody tells somebody to think, right? It's one thing to give somebody an answer, but it's another thing to help somebody learn how to think.
Think it through.
Right? A lot of the times when we parent, we try to give them the answer.
Yeah.
That's not going to help them
because we don't want them to be hurt. We want to just say, okay, do it like this and it will be okay. But we're actually undermining the learning. We're undermining the teaching.
But we don't understand that there is a way that this child thinks, right? There's a way that this child tends to think. So when we can understand that, then we can help them to appreciate, oh, okay, well, I get why you feel the way that you feel. And that's where we start to really There's a difference between validating what somebody experiences and agreeing with them, right? A lot of the times in my work with people, adults, young, old, whatever, I listen to them in a way that when I listen to them, they feel heard. When I listen to them, they're like, yeah, yes, exactly. That's exactly it, right?
Affirming them, affirming their feelings, affirming what they're saying.
It's less about affirming them and more validating and joining them. It's empathizing with them, right? Something happens when somebody feels heard and feels understood, right? There's this bond that starts to be built because you get me. Notice, I didn't say I agree, right? A man came to my office with a rope in his bag. Okay?
Wow.
Rope in his bag. Like that's where he was. Now, I understood where he was. I heard him, right? I heard him. Did I agree with him? No.
No.
It wasn't until I heard him and he knew that I heard him that we could move on to the rest of the story. Okay, well, what else is going on? Is there more that you live for? Tell me a little bit about, this person or that person. And then he started to open up again. He started to remember. He started to realize he had reason to live because the way that he was thinking was changing, right? But that doesn't happen until we listen, until we can validate, not necessarily agree, but validate.
But
Right?
that takes time. So parents, what you need to realize here is you can't go through life quickly all the time with children. And it may be time that you don't feel you have, but when your child is going through something, listen to what Andrew just said. A gentleman had a rope in his bag. So he had already made a decision about what he felt he needed to do to resolve his situation. But through a validating conversation that was built on empathy and listening, true listening, that man changed his choice, but that takes time. So when we're walking through our journey with our children and we can see, in a minute, I'm going to ask you, Andrew, what are the red flags, right, that parents can look out for? And this isn't just for older kids. I believe for our littles as well, for young children that are 3 and 4 years old, when we're able to stop and actually listen and understand what it means, not to just affirm, as I had thought, but to validate what they're feeling so that you can have this empathetic conversation, you're actually building a bond. That is what the enemy doesn't want to happen. So he wants you to say, don't worry about it. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Just go sit down. Don't worry. That's not the appropriate response. So we got to think about, how are we responding? Are we just affirming or are we validating? Are we coming with empathy, or do our children feel like we're not completely present? We're not willing to sit down, turn off the stove and say, my 7-year-old needs me. I need to have this conversation.
And Sandy, this is where the education comes in, right? When we listen, if we don't know what to listen for, then we have good intentions. We may even make the time, but if we don't know what to listen for, then we get lost, right? Then
so give us a couple of those things. What are the things that we should be looking for or listening for as we are? And sometimes we feel, and I know that there's some parents watching that think that, Andrew's talking about teenagers, but I don't think so, because I know your kids are not teenagers, right? No. And I'm sure that everything you're saying right now is how you and your wife have tried to deal with different situations, because 5-year-olds go through stress. What? 5-year-olds experience anxiety, right? So what are some of those red flags in terms of what kids are saying, or some of the behaviors that we as parents need to take more seriously?
Wow. Okay. So red flags, and it looks so different. It looks so different. I was like I shared earlier, I was the kind of kid that my parents didn't worry about me. There were no red flags, right? For the most part, I was getting great grades. I was doing well in school. Um, so sometimes there aren't things that you can see, but that's why it's important to be to have. I'm going to give you a few things to weave into your family culture, okay? Because that's a proactive approach. But I'll talk about some red flags, and then we'll come back to the family culture piece. But when the child who may be typically engaging and excited and happy about life, when you see them withdraw, that's something to be aware of. When you see a particular mood that's lasting for a long time, or if you see them avoiding particular situations or particular people, those are things to be aware of. I know sometimes kids, when they're growing, they might sleep more, they might eat more, maybe even less, or diet changes. But sometimes those can be things that you want to pay attention to as well. When their grades fall, that's another indicator something's going on. Um, Depending on the level of involvement and the wonderful kind of teacher that they have, sometimes you get insight and information from external sources like the teacher, right? They might be like, okay, I this is what I noticed. Have you noticed the same thing? You want to be aware of those things and not just to dismiss them. Sometimes if your child is aggressive or irritable, right? Sometimes we write them off as just angry
Or
children
moody.
or
Yeah.
moody, right? But a lot of the times that's an expression, it's a release of some underlying things, whether it's hurt, trauma, or whatever it is. There's always something that's going on for that child. So it's important to be aware of those things. Like I said, it's sometimes the things are obvious and we're just not interpreting them right or paying enough attention, but other times it would seem that there are no signs. And in those situations, it's all the more important to understand how the mind works, but also to cultivate a relationship with that child. So you're on the in, right? And I know that, as kids get older, they go through these phases where, friends are just as important or maybe even more important than family. And I know that's a common way to think about things. However, I would encourage you not to just accept that as a blanket statement, right?
Amen.
I took my little one to Safari Niagara the other day, and we were all harnessed up and we were going on this ride. It was just like this apparatus. It was 30 feet up in the air. Okay. 30 feet. I was scared. I'm a full grown man. I was scared. And she's 4 years old. So I'm going with her. I'm behind her. She's tethered in and she's looking down and she's scared. She wants to go. She doesn't want to go. She wants to go. She doesn't want to go. And as much as I was tethered to this thing, there was a harness. I was good. She was good. I'm like, you're not going to fall. You're not going to fall. This thing, I'm trying to tell her this thing is going to hold us.
Yeah.
What she cared about was daddy. Daddy, you got me. Daddy, you're
Not the
not.
harness. Daddy,
No,
are you holding me?
she wasn't paying attention to the harness. The harness didn't mean nothing to her. What meant something to her was me. Daddy, you got me? You got me, Daddy. You're not going to let me fall? You're not going to She was not going to take another step unless she knew that
She was
I was.
assured that you were there. Yeah.
Parents, whether or not they say it or not, I want you to assume that your children want you there with them.
Yes.
Right? They want you there with them. If they can't find the words, or if your relationship has been so damaged to the point where they don't want you there, heal it, because beneath that, they want you there. And this is not just for kids, this is for adult children. Okay? Adult children. Because when we experience pain and trauma as children, it's like somebody presses pause on our emotional and spiritual development.
I agree 100%.
So
And you're
many
stuck
times-
there. You're
You
stuck
are.
there.
You are. I know from personal experience. I was leading a men's abuse response program where grown men who have abused their partners or allegedly abused their partners have to come and get counseling or coaching from me. Let me tell you, I was an 8-year-old in that room.
Wow.
I was an 8-year-old
Wow.
in that room. I was scared. I don't know why. I must have been a glutton for punishment, right? But the Lord had me there, and it was in that environment I realized, oh my goodness, I'm a grown man, but I feel like an 8-year-old boy.
Hmm.
And I started to heal and grow so that my internal self caught up to my external self, right? It's a process that we can help our kids go through and grow through. We heal from the inside out. And so I don't want people who have older children to lose hope. It's
Well,
never
and
too late, right?
and also, Andrew, think about what Andrew has just said. If you, as a parent watching, haven't resolved issues with your parents, you are stuck. There are some difficult conversations that you're going to have and try to initiate to really let go and to feel that release. Otherwise, you are going to be stuck in your trauma. I have heard testimonies of parents, of adults going to the grave even of their mother or father to release what they're feeling because emotionally that trauma has stuck them somewhere, and then you run the risk of repeating that behavior with your own child. Remember what Andrew said earlier, unconsciously he heard his father coming on. I have that has happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you, but sometimes there's something deeper that you need to address. Otherwise it's going to continue to contaminate your attempts to be the best parent that you can be.
Right, right, 100%. And a lot of the times we make it sound really difficult. And I'm of the opinion that it doesn't have to be. It can be really easy if you know what you're doing,
Mhm.
right? You know, like you said, people have gone to people's graves. Sometimes we think, oh, I have to address this directly with the person. Well, not usually, especially if the person is not a safe person. That don't make no sense.
Yeah.
It'll make no sense. Your healing is not dependent upon somebody else's acknowledgement.
Oh,
Okay.
say that again. Say that again, Andrew.
Your healing is not dependent upon somebody else's acknowledgement
Hmm.
of that hurt, right? You're not chained to your past because somebody else hasn't moved on. You don't need somebody else's forgiveness or permission to heal. You don't. You really, really don't.
Hmm.
So it's important to be aware. And that comes back to this self-awareness piece. Like, if I'm not being my best self, if I'm missing the mark, well, I get to address that. I get to be healed. I get to be whole from the inside out, so that as
Hmm.
I parent, that child now experiences another level of life, of wholeness, of emotional wellness, right? We can then connect. One of the reasons why I was so alone in my childhood was because I didn't think the adults around me could actually handle what I was going through, right? I'm like, you got enough of that to deal with. You got
I'm
enough of
not I'm not
that
giving
to
you
deal with.
anything
I'm
else.
not giving you any more. And deeper than that, so it's like, what are you gonna do with
Yeah.
me when I tell you what I'm
What
going
I'm
through?
going through.
It's like, no, I'm gonna keep this stuff to myself, right? Trust me, I was well loved. There was no question about whether or not my family loved me, but there was a question about whether or not they could help me, right? So this multi-pronged approach, heal the relationship, understand how the mind works, but then they come together through healing communication. Healing communication. The art of a genuine apology is part of it. But we can actually build esteem and affirmation, and we can become what I call confidence cultivators. We can do that with our language every single day.
Okay. Yeah.
Every single day. We can build up our children. We can understand where they're thinking and how they're thinking. I'll give you an example because, like, my children, they're similar, but most people engage in all or nothing thinking at some point. But a lot of the times when we have children who are anxious, this is one of the big five, I call them. One of the big five. Big five. Can you see my hand in the big five?
Five.
The big five. And it's all or nothing thinking. And you can tell there's all or nothing thinking by the language. Okay. When people use absolutes or extremes, they're engaging in all or nothing thinking.
Hmm.
So I always get this wrong. I can't do this. Whenever you use an absolute, you're most likely going to be wrong, right? So I always get this wrong tells me that that's how she's thinking. She's an all or nothing thought pattern, okay? So when I realize that she's stuck, what I can do is I can say, okay, you look frustrated. Okay, I'm getting into some teaching points here. You want to identify the emotion, okay? You're looking frustrated. Am I getting that right? And with those two phrases, okay, what I've done is I've highlighted an emotion, okay? But then I'm also opening the door to accurate empathy. Did I get that right? Right? You know, you've heard that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, that's the empathy thing, and you want to get it right. You're empowering them, okay? You're feeling frustrated. I get that right? They might say, yeah, I am frustrated. Right then and there, boom, you're already connecting, right?
So just to be clear for my West Indian viewers, how your face looks so? That's not the same as what Andrew just said. How you walk on your face looks so sour. That is not what Andrew just said to do. He said you name an emotion that you feel is matching, and then you ask the child or the youth, did I get that right? So don't translate that for my West Indian friends. Okay, go ahead, Andrew. I just want to clarify that.
Right, exactly, because sometimes we get so irritated with the presentation that we take off the helper support role and we put on some other role, right? You know, we think it's teaching, but no, it's not. You're not teaching them anything, but not to come to you, right?
Ever again.
Right? So, but when we label them, because a lot of children don't automatically know how to label their emotions.
They don't have the language.
Part of language culture, then we're not going to do that, right? So if they don't know how they feel, they're not going to be better equipped to deal with it the next time they feel that emotion, because they're going to feel that emotion. So label the emotion. Okay, yeah, you're feeling frustrated. Okay, what's going through your mind, right? Well, I always mess this up. I always mess this up. Okay, so you always mess that up. Right then and there, I know, okay, she's doing all that thinking thing. I'm like, okay, well, you always mess it up? And she's like, well, no, not always. But I can't do it. But I just saw you do it like yesterday. Well, you know, I just want to be able to do it right. You want to be able to do it right every time. I get it. Yeah, I get it. I want to do things right every time, all the time too. But
doesn't happen that way.
Perfect. That's just not how it works. So
it's almost as if you're guiding them, gently guiding them back on the path of what is truly, really happening, rather than jolting them and dragging them by their arm and saying, fix your face. What is wrong with you? You're guiding them, and you're actually letting them turn the wheel back over to what is actually really what's happening.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. Trust me, that way you join them in the moment, you're teaching them, but then there's later teaching that comes after they've kind of got through the moment. You can follow up and be like, okay, you know, I've heard you use this language quite a bit. Do you know what that's called? That's called all or nothing thinking, right? And you start to educate them about the thought patterns, right? So now me and my girls, we have this thing where, because I use it sometimes too, and they stop me. Always, Daddy? Always?
Really, Daddy? Right? I love that.
Right? Because now it's part of the culture. It's part of the way that, right? So when I ask my children, so what's going through your mind at the time, right? Because I'm working with one of my daughters to not be afraid of bees, right? And so I'm helping her understand how the mind works. So when you're feeling afraid, what are you imagining? And then she'll describe it for me. I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense you'd feel that way. But what would make you think that would happen? Right? So, and then I start to help her, right? And then what options do you have? It's an empowering conversation. Now, the last time I heard, she's like, Daddy, I did it, right? I shoot it away. I'm like, all right. All
We're
right.
good. And you're still here. It's good. It's
Right.
good. But
So
it's so, but what you said up earlier, care and competence. You can't be competent if you don't know, you don't understand.
that's
So
right.
parents, we need to realize that this idea of, you know what you're doing just because you have a child is not true.
That's not
It's
fair. It's not fair to
and
yourself.
actually that's a more fair assessment. It's not fair.
Hmm.
You need to give yourself space and grace and permission to learn, and it's important that you plug into resources that allow you to continue to learn, because the more you know, the more you grow, and the more impactful you can be as a parent, right? Not only for your child but even for yourself. It's empowering for yourself when you're using these tools that you have and you see them working, you see a change in your child, you see your relationship with them deepening. But if you don't engage in learning something new, you're going to keep using the same strategies and tools that are actually probably causing more harm, right?
100%, 100%, because we have these strong, wonderful values, right? We have these expectations of our children and desires for them, and we want to see them thrive. It's good intention. However, if we're not aware of how these thought patterns are playing out in the lives of our children, what happens is they might move through an issue. They might grow out of it, right? But then what happens when they find themselves in a bigger situation, but they're using the same thought pattern, right?
Yeah.
So now we've gone, past, oh, I didn't color this in right. I colored outside the lines. Ugh. Now, oh, I
Now
didn't
it's something bigger.
now it's bigger.
Yeah.
Now I didn't get 95% on the test. Now I'm not going to get into university. Now, right? Oh my goodness, they're going to fire me because I didn't, right? Like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger with the
Mm.
child. It's the same pattern, but it's just the stakes are higher now,
and
right?
and it and it's and the child has the same amount of tools when they're 19 that they had when they're 9, and they
Right.
weren't even good enough when they were 9. But
Right.
that's what we're sending them out into the world
Right.
with. But Andrew, listen, you're not going to believe me when I say that our time is up. It has been an hour. But you know what? I think we do need to have a part 2, and I will tell you why. I had some questions about blended families and co-parenting, and I know that's always a big issue. Single parents, how do these same strategies apply when you're in a blended family situation, when you're co-parenting, or when you're raising a child by yourself? So Andrew, I need you to commit to coming back to doing a part 2, Dr. Andrew Blackwood.
Well, I will gladly. I love spending time with you, and this is my heart. This is what I do. I want parents. I want people all over the world to be well
Yes.
in body, but also well in mind. And if you're well in mind, you're going to be well in spirit. And I want people to be able to parent as well as they can, as well as they want to, right? So, by all means, by
We're going to
all
have to schedule a part 2. We're going to have to. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. And we will schedule that part 2 sooner than later, because there's so much more to talk about, because this is a topic that we don't have enough conversations about. And that lack of conversation is causing harm in families. So I believe that both of us have the same heart,
yeah,
to make a difference intergenerationally, that we can give a parent a tool that they will use with their child, that child will use with that child, that can change the way that families flow and thrive together. So thank you so
right.
much for being a part of my show. And I'm sure the viewers are very, very, I see some comments in the chat thanking you. Part 2 for the win, somebody said. So that is a contract. No, you signed a contract. Somebody said for the win. To delve into that part 2. So Andrew,
No,
thank you so
Sandy,
much for being a
honestly,
part of this.
Sandy, people they don't have to wait for the part 2 to reach out.
That's
So
the truth. Where
you
can
know,
they find you? Where can people find you?
sure, you can always find me at info@coachdrew.ca or coachdrew.ca. That's my website. I am throwing myself into a new way to support Christian parents, supporting children with challenges with their anxiety and their thoughts and their emotions. So it's a good season. It is a really good season, especially like how we're getting ready to go back to school.
Yep.
Right.
It's a whole other layer of challenges kids are going to go through.
Don't
right?
wait till September to try to support them to get ready.
Start now.
Yeah.
Start
yeah.
now. All right. Thank you, my friend. And we're still doing a part 2 though.
All right. Yes, for sure.
All right. Thank you. So parents, listen, thank you so much for joining. Remember that building mental wealth in your children is something that you are called to do. And you do not have to do that alone. I really, really hope and pray that you're going to reach out to Coach Drew. CoachDrew.ca is how you can find him, just to get those tools that he's talking about. He talked about care and competence. All of us care deeply for and love our children. But how are we building our competence to match our ability to support them, right? What tools do we have that are going to make the difference in their lives? I say this to end every single broadcast. You are an empowered parent, but that empowerment doesn't come the day you have a child. That empowerment is a journey, and you grow in it day by day, moment by moment, as you take initiative to grow and deepen your understanding in more things so you can apply that to your parenting journey. You don't have to parent the way your mom did. You don't have to parent the way your dad did. You can parent the way that God has called you to parent, but we have to be intentional and we have to be purposeful. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. Remember to subscribe, to like this video, and to share it. And always, 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 you are an empowered parent. Thank you for joining.